Szinte mindenki hallott már a Társas lény című könyvről, amely a szociálpszichológiának egy alapkönyve, dr. Elliot Aronson professzor tollából. Elliot Aronson a Stanford Egyetem nyugalmazott professzora, és több más egyetemen is tanított. Magyarul a 70-es évek végén jelent meg a könyve, és itt van most velünk a professzor úr Elliot Aronson. It's a real honor and delight to talk to you. Why do we love some people and why do we hate others?
Well, that's a very short question, but it would require several days for me to answer it. I think we love people partly because we like some of their personality characteristics. We like them because they are attractive in some ways, good looking. We like them because they are smart and wise, but most of all, we like them because they like us. And we are creatures who enjoy being liked, and therefore if someone is pleasant to us, thinks highly of us, we tend to like them. We like them if they are like us, if they agree with us on important issues. And that is why tribalism exists, because we tend to like people who are similar to us in a lot of ways, who are members of the same tribe, in effect. And we dislike people who are very different from us. We are a little bit concerned about them. We have difficulty coming close to them, and that is why prejudice exists. If a person has a different religion from us or has a different skin color, we tend to keep away from them. We tend to believe that they are untrustworthy. We tend to believe they are unlikable by anyone. And so liking and disliking, that is a deep social psychological issue.
Social psychology focuses on how people's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by others. How would you define it in your own words?
In my own words, I would say that social psychology is about human interaction, how we relate to other people. And the two major pillars of social psychology are social influence and attraction. The two major things are how we influence other people and how other people influence us. We can be influenced by living people or dead people. We're influenced by people who have written books 500 years ago, but that is still part of social influence. So influence is an extremely important part of social psychology, and influence is with us all the time. Every time we turn on the radio or the television, every time we go to a meeting of other people, we are in the process of being influenced. If we are the kind of person that people listen to, if we're a professor or we have our own television show, we are in a position to influence other people. Politicians depend on influence for their popularity. It's a very, very powerful aspect of social psychology, and it's the thing that I've been studying all my life.
You grew up in a small blue-collar town in Massachusetts, and you attended Hebrew school, but you were sometimes beaten up by gangs of tough teenagers. And this is where your career in social psychology started. Can you share this story?
Sure. One of my most vivid childhood memories is walking home from Hebrew school at night in the dark when I was about 9 years old. And there were all these little gangs of teenagers, and frequently they would shout anti-Semitic slogans at me, and they would call me names, and this was around 1940, 1941. They would shout at me that Hitler has the right idea in killing Jews. And sometimes they would push me around, and every once in a while, a gang of 5 or 6 teenagers would beat me up. And one day, after one of these beatings, I remember walking away from it and sitting on a curbstone at night, and I was nursing a bloody nose and a split lip, and feeling very sorry for myself, and I started to ask myself, why do these people hate Jews so much? Were they born hating Jews, or did somebody teach them to hate Jews? And then I wondered, why do they hate me so much? And if they got to know me better and found out what a sweet and charming little boy I was, would they like me more? And then wondering, I wonder if they liked me more and knew that I was Jewish, would that make them maybe hate other Jews less than they hate them now? And also wondering if that could be changed, if someone taught them to hate Jews and they met some Jews who were nice people, could they change their whole attitude? Now, of course, I didn't realize it at the time, but those are profound social psychological questions.
Your family was very poor. During your first years in college, you spent the nights outside and in parks and cars. Also, your father wasn't what we would call today a supportive parent. How did you survive, and where did your intellectual curiosity come from?
Well, my father had a very rough life. He was uneducated, and during the Great Depression in the 1930s, he was unemployed, and he had a lot of difficulty. He'd find a job, and we were very, very poor, and sometimes we went to bed hungry, and sometimes there was not enough money to heat the house in the winter, and it was very difficult for him, and I imagine he had a very hard time. But he wasn't, because he was so unhappy about his inability to earn enough money to support the family. He was not easy to have as a father. He was very distant and not very loving. And then he died when I was still in high school. I went to a particular university, Brandeis University, because that was the only one that would offer me a scholarship. So I had my tuition paid for by the university, but I didn't have enough money for food or for lodging, so I often slept in parked cars on campus.
Your second encounter with psychology happened when you visited Abraham Maslow's class. Maslow was the founding father of humanistic psychology and is best known for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What did you find so compelling about Maslow's work?
Well, the first time I ever saw Maslow was quite by accident. I was majoring in economics and not in psychology. It was my sophomore year. It was exactly 10 years after the incident of my raising those questions while sitting on that curbstone in Massachusetts. And I was having coffee with a young woman, a fellow student, very attractive woman, and I had romantic feelings about her. I figured I'd walk her to class, and then when she got to the classroom, she told me that it was a lecture class in introductory psychology, a large class. And I figured I'll go sit next to her, and maybe we can sit in the back of the room, and maybe we could hold hands or something like that. Those were innocent times. And it was a class being taught by Abraham Maslow. I never heard of him, just a professor, and he was lecturing on something. And I'm sitting next to the girl, and suddenly he starts talking about prejudice. And I started to listen, and he was raising some of the same questions that I had raised 10 years earlier, sitting on that curbstone. And so I dropped the girl's hand and I started to take notes. And I was really inspired by Maslow. And the very next day, I officially changed my major from economics to psychology, because for the first time I realized that psychology was a discipline that really investigated questions like why people are prejudiced against each other. Later, in the course of a few months, I got to know Maslow, and I became a protege of his, and he kind of took me under his wing and was very kind to me, and it turned out to be a really, really important relationship for me.
Your most famous mentor was Leon Festinger, the father of cognitive dissonance theory. But in your autobiographical book, you wrote that he didn't really like Maslow. So what was wrong with Maslow, according to Festinger?
Well, according to Festinger, Maslow had ideas that could not be tested empirically. You could not do experiments, that they were very vague ideas. And what Festinger said to me, he once asked me, we went out to a bar to have a drink, and he said, oh, by the way, Elliot, how did you first get interested in psychology? And I said, oh, this guy Abraham Maslow I got. And he said, Maslow? That guy's ideas are so vague and so that they're not even wrong, which was a great statement. They're not even wrong, meaning you can't test them. You can't prove them right or wrong. And I think he was right. When I was at Brandeis working with Maslow, I used to tease him about how come you never do any experimental research to test some of your ideas. And he said, that's not what I do. He said, I'm an idea man. I'm not a scientist. And he wasn't. He didn't do psychology as a science. He got ideas, and the ideas were beautiful. I loved them. The notion, the hierarchy of basic needs that you mentioned a minute ago, really an interesting idea. And the idea of self-actualization, which I see as a process, not a goal. Maslow drew a pyramid to show the ideas, and at the very peak is self-actualization. But if I were drawing that, I would say self-actualization is a process that we never reach the peak, but anyone who's on the road towards self-actualization is always on that road, and it's a process of becoming, moving, becoming the kind of person you always wanted to be. And it might take 100 years, but you will eventually move closer and closer to that goal.
Okay. Could you explain the cognitive dissonance theory, which is your favorite?
Cognitive dissonance occurs if a person holds two ideas, two cognitions, that where the one contradicts the other. For example, if you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and then you learn that cigarette smoking causes cancer, those two notions are dissonant with each other. And what people do when they experience cognitive dissonance is they try to reduce the dissonance, because the cognitive dissonance is painful. It's like extreme hunger or extreme thirst. It's a negative drive state, but it occurs in your head instead of in your stomach. And in order to reduce the dissonance, the best way, of course, is to stop smoking. But a lot of people, millions and millions of people, have tried to stop smoking and found it very, very difficult. So then they work on the other cognition. Well, the research showing that that cigarette smoking is harmful, it's not really good research. Or, all right, maybe it will lead to cancer, but I would rather have a happier life, even if it's a little bit shorter, and smoking makes me happy. Those are ways of reducing dissonance.
You later expanded Festinger's work with your own theory of self-justification. Can you tell us what it means?
We had a president, Bill Clinton, and a lot of people really liked him a lot. I was one of those people. I loved him. I thought he was a terrific president. And then we found out that he was having sex in the Oval Office, in the president's office, with a young intern, a woman. And so I was wondering, does that cause dissonance, that I liked him and he was having sex? And I'm not sure whether that causes dissonance or not. Now, I am supposed to be an expert on cognitive dissonance. If I wasn't sure, then there's something wrong with the theory. So I thought about it for a while, and I thought, the thing that makes cognitive dissonance really certain is when I say right at the center of the theory, it makes good predictions. What I mean is, at the center, what does the center of the theory mean? Well, when I thought about it for several days, I realized that the center of the theory is the self-concept. Who do I think I am? So, for example, in the example of Bill Clinton, I might feel a little bit of dissonance, a tiny bit, if he does something that I think is wrong, but not nearly as bad as I would feel if I had done the same thing. So I realized that it was the self-concept has to be one of those cognitions. And so all I did was I said, cognitive dissonance theory makes its clearest, its best predictions when one of those cognitions is your self-concept and the other one is you perform an action which is opposite to what you believe in. So, for example, if I believe it's important to be patient with your students, if you happen to be a teacher, and I end up getting angry at one of my students, and I look at that, that's cognitive dissonance. I believe in patience. That's part of my self-concept, and I got angry at a student. That's very, very dissonant. Much more powerful than the dissonance I would feel if Bill Clinton was having sex with a young woman.
In your personal life, how do you catch yourself in the act of reducing dissonance, and how can you avoid it?
Well, first of all, what you need to know is that all dissonance reduction is not bad. Some of it has terrible consequences, but sometimes it's important to be able to reduce dissonance. It's helpful and it's been going on for a very long time in the history of the world. I think people who lived in caves thousands of years ago were experiencing dissonance and reducing it. And if you wanted to be able to sleep well at night, you need to be pretty good at reducing dissonance. There are important things where in reducing dissonance, you can really dig yourself into a hole and you can really hurt other people a lot by doing that. Like, for example, when George W. Bush was president of the United States, he invaded Iraq because he believed that Saddam Hussein, the premier of Iraq, had weapons of mass destruction. And that it led to a terrible war. He believed it because he wanted to believe it. And that was a terrible act of dissonance reduction. And when they couldn't find weapons of mass destruction, they widened the war in order to look for those weapons. There were no weapons of mass destruction. And he did it all as a deepening the war, widening the war, as a way of reducing his dissonance, and he was wrong.
Today we live in media echo chambers where any belief can be confirmed or dismissed as fake news. How does it affect cognitive dissonance?
The most important way is that people will believe what they want to believe. And if the media, there are media that will tell you what you want to hear, even though it may be incorrect and fake news. But if it's fake news that goes along with your own political beliefs, it's very comforting. So people believe what they want to believe, and they tune into radio stations and the internet information that fits their belief, and that leads to what the political scientists call polarization, where there are groups of people that can't talk to each other because they're so far apart, because they're listening to different media, and each of the media that they're listening to supports their belief. So they think the other person is totally crazy for having a different belief. And that's how families are split apart often in their belief systems. And I think it's a dreadful situation because there is no talking to a person who has his beliefs confirmed by the media he happens to be listening to.
In The Social Animal, in your book, The Social Animal, you explored conformity, aggression in face-to-face context. If you could write a new chapter today, what would you write about?
Well, of course, I am writing a new chapter today for my 13th edition of that book. And we are dealing with the social media a lot, and how Donald Trump in America has exacerbated all of this stuff, because every time he opens his mouth, what comes out are things that are provable lies, but that appeals to the people who are his supporters. And it's an amazing situation in America, and I suppose it's true in most countries where there is a movement toward autocracy, in America, in Hungary, in Turkey, and in a great many countries. And autocrats can say whatever they want to say, and the media, and find media that will support them. And it leads to incredible polarization and a disruption in the normal communication between people who should be talking to each other, but they're busily supporting their own positions that are miles apart. This is conformity to a greater extent than any time, I think, maybe since the Second World War, when a lot of people wanted to believe the propaganda that was coming out.
What do you see as the single most dangerous psychological effect of social media?
Well, exactly what I've been talking about. The psychological effect is that it makes for people who are who believe certain things and then close their mind to anything that might contradict it, because it might produce, if they hear a contradictory belief and someone has good evidence for the contradictory belief, it causes enormous dissonance, and where people can avoid dissonance, they're going to avoid it, so that the social media the polarization caused by the social media is the worst effect that it can have.
Let's talk about the jigsaw classroom. And here, a small personal story. So in the 90s, I was finishing my German studies and started teaching as a German teacher. And I tested your method of jigsaw. Why did you start with it?
The schools were desegregated by court order. In Texas, black students and Mexican-American students were living in one part of town, and the Anglo-white students were living in another part of town. So when schools were desegregated in 1971, they were brought together in the same school for the first time. They weren't accustomed to each other. And within a month or two, it became a very difficult situation. There were fistfights in the corridors and the schoolyards. Students were fighting against each other along racial lines. And the superintendent of schools called me on the phone and asked if there was anything I could do to stop the violence. Part of what exacerbated the situation was the fact that the classroom is usually a very competitive place and in this situation, the black kids and the Mexican American kids were underprepared because their schools in the poorer sections of town were underfunded and they were undereducated. The black kids and the Mexican American kids were thrust into a highly competitive situation where they were guaranteed to lose. And so my students and I, my graduate students and I, who came into those places and observed the classrooms for a couple of days, immediately realized that what we needed to do was get kids cooperating with each other, taking the classroom and breaking it down so that there were these 5-person groups which consisted, every group was as diverse as it could be. There were boys and girls, there were black kids, white kids, Mexican American kids in every group, and their job, each one had one part of the lesson, and they were to share it with their fellow students. So each kid became a teacher who was teaching a part of the lesson, and the only access the other kids had to that part of the lesson was through paying attention to that kid who was teaching it. So if they didn't like that kid because if I'm a white kid and they're a black kid and I don't like black people, if I didn't pay attention to him, I would lose what he was trying to teach me. Students in jigsaw classrooms got better scores on the exams than students learning the same material through the traditional competitive method in other schools. And their self-esteem improved, their liking for one another increased.
In 2010, you published an amazing autobiographical book. It's also translated into Hungarian. And in that, you're saying that human abilities are not carved into stone and people can grow. What makes you so optimistic?
Well, I see it all around me. I see where people are given an opportunity to grow and change in a direction that makes them happier and that is good for society. I see that happening all the time. And the jigsaw is one very good example of that. I've had students who were Black or Mexican American with little hope for climbing out of poetry, out of poverty, and they were able to do things. It's not carved in stone that people can rise out of poverty and people can educate themselves or become educated if they find the right way to go. And it can happen all the time.
You have been married to your wife, Vera, for more than 70 years. She's also Hungarian. Can you share your secret?
I used to say my secret is to marry Vera, but only one person can do that, I guess. Vera is a wonderful human being with a great personality. But I don't like to give advice, but there are two things that I know, and the two things that we practiced, that we did in our marriage, was one, it's important to keep romance alive. And it's not always easy to do because you get married and you start having children, and the next thing you know, you become mommy and daddy, and Anuka and Apuka. Your identity becomes that of a parent rather than that of a lover, and it comes in slowly when your role changes. And Vera and I were aware of that when we were very young parents, and we realized that we had to allow certain space for ourselves to be romantic, to continue being romantic, in spite of the fact that we had 4 children. We had 4 children who were all under 6 years old. We had children very quickly in our marriage, and we had to have space for ourselves to be romantic. And our children quickly learned that there were certain times of the day and night when they were not allowed into our bedroom. And the second thing is communication. I don't think 2 people can live together under close quarters, make all kinds of decisions together, compromise left and right, without there being some conflict occasionally. One shouldn't expect to have a marriage that is totally conflict-free. You're going to have conflict. Everybody has conflict. The issue is not whether you have conflicts or not, but how you deal with them. And the important thing is communication. And there's a way of communicating where you don't blame the other person for something that you don't like, but you talk about your own feelings and what that person has done that has evoked these feelings. Some of the feelings are warm and loving and excited and all of that. That should be shared. Some of the feelings are anger, frustration, and that can be shared also. And that kind of communication that we call straight talk is really important because it doesn't mean that what the other person is doing is wrong. It simply means that it evokes these feelings in me, And we can then decide whether these feelings are something that are unique to me, that nobody else in the world would feel that way, or it may be that there's something about what you're doing that you might be able to change. And this allows for rational discussion. When you start blaming the other person and you start saying the other person is doing something terrible, then it makes communication difficult. Those are the two things I would suggest.
In January, you will turn 94. What is your relationship, if I may ask this question, what is your relationship to death?
I love it. I mean, there are a lot of problems with being in one's 90s. I would be crazy if I didn't say that that's the case. The body starts breaking down. I have a lot of things wrong with me. I am mostly blind. That is, I have a little bit of eyesight, but everything looks fuzzy to me. I also have leukemia and I have a heart condition, but I'm still here and I'm still alive and I can do things. And the older you get, the more you get a little bit of wisdom, because you've got some experience, and I like that a lot. So I like being the way I am. I like being this age. I lose a lot of friends, because all the friends who are older than me or even a little younger than me, I've lost them all. People die. And that's a sad fact of life that we learn early, but then we try to avoid thinking about. But it happens, and it's part of being human. And we do the best we can. We live the life we want to live as best we can.
And last but not least, what is your favorite Hungarian food, if I may ask?
Well, I guess it would be chicken paprikás.
Csirkepaprikás, okay.
I love it. We have that probably about once a week in this house, and it's very, very good stuff. I love things with paprikás. I love things with makos. I love noodles with cabbage. Vera is a very good cook and makes a lot of these Hungarian dishes.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. It was amazing talking to you.
It was lovely talking to you, Sylvia.